Coming up on today's Indonesia, remembering Lee Kuan Yew, one of the most influential figures in Asia. President Joko Widodo heads to East Asia to push up more foreign investment. And we get wet and be surprised in Bali's annual kissing ritual. Hello and welcome. This is today's Indonesia. I am Luisa Kusnandar. Indonesia and other world leaders paid tribute on Monday as Singapore mourned the death of its founding father, Lee Kuan Yew. President Joko Widodo, during his state visit in Tokyo, Japan on Monday, expressed his deepest condolence to the Singaporean government and its people for their loss. He said Singapore had succeeded in transforming itself into a major economic hub in the ASEAN region under Lee's administration. Lee, the founder of modern Singapore, died on Monday at the age of 91 after being treated at the hospital since February 5th. Thousands of people and dozens of world leaders are expected to pay their respect to Lee's funeral. We listen to what the leaders say about him.
The first of our founding fathers is no more. He inspired us, gave us courage, kept us together, and brought us here. He fought for our independence, built a nation where there was none, and made us proud to be Singaporeans. We won't see another man like him.
Mantan Perdana Menteri Lee Kuan Yew adalah teman dekat Indonesia dan dikenal sebagai bapak pendiri Singapura modern dan seorang pemimpin dan negarawan besar yang mencintai rakyatnya.
李光耀先生是具有独特影响力的亚洲政治家。 也是兼具东方价值观和国际视野的战略家。他是中新关系的缔造者和奠基者，长期推动中新互利合作。
Lee has been known as Singapore's first and longest-serving prime minister who led the state country for nearly 3 decades. A state funeral will be held on March 29 at the National University of Singapore after a week of mourning. Lee Kuan Yew meant transformation for the newly independent Singapore. The Indonesia Channel's Roberlin Purba traces Lee's influential leadership.
Lee Kuan Yew was born on September 23, 1929 in Singapore. He is credited with turning the city-state into one of the world's richest nations. As the country's first prime minister, Lee guided Singapore through its split with Malaysia in 1965 and helped turn what was a sleepy port city into a global trade and finance center. Lee's legacy includes an efficient government with little corruption, low tax rates to attract foreign investments, excellent schools, and clean and safe streets. These have helped Singapore rank consistently near the top of surveys of the most hospitable cities for expatriates. In October 2009, after meeting Lee at the White House, U.S. President Obama said Lee was an Asian giant.
This is one of the legendary figures of Asia in the 20th and 21st centuries. He is somebody who helped to trigger the Asian economic miracle.
Lee was also a close friend of Indonesia's former president, Suharto. Many Singaporeans, particularly older ones, viewed him as a wise, if strict, father figure.
To me, I think personally, he also helped me a lot, you know, and also my children are able to go to proper school and receive good education, you know. So all the time I salute to this man. Because of him, we are so, you know, happy to live in Singapore.
Everybody was hoping that he will get recover and stay strong and celebrate the 50 years of the nations, because he has been served the country that well and has been bring up from the third world to the first world, and everybody should see how good he has transformed the country.
Lee's People's Action Party has ruled Singapore since 1959. The statesman remained a powerful advisor with cabinet minister status after stepping down as prime minister in 1990. Lee stayed active in his later years, commenting on domestic and international affairs and representing Singapore on frequent trips abroad. One of his sons, Lee Hsien Loong, is Singapore's current Prime Minister. Robert Purba, the Indonesia Channel.
We get perspective now from our viewpoint analyst. Wimar Witoelar is here. He's a former presidential spokesman, now running his own communications company. Wimar, welcome. First and foremost, you've met Lee in person.
Yeah, I met him several times, many times in fact. He had a long life and I have a long life up till now. So I think the first time I met him was I was in my teens,
wow,
in my late teens when I was a student.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
How was the experience? What do you think of him?
He's an amazing man. Definitely, he is a great man, especially in the context of Singapore. Singapore as really as Singapore. I don't know what would have become of him if he were, say, in Indonesia, and I don't know what Indonesia would become if he were here. But suffice it to say, Lee Kuan Yew is the best thing that happened to Singapore, and he also managed to exit quite gracefully.
Exactly. Now, Asia has lost one of its leading statesmen. How will his death impact Indonesia, do you think? And how will it impact the bilateral ties between Indonesia and Singapore?
I don't think it will have that much impact in the official sense, because Singapore has become very much almost a machine, a very institutionalized country, which is no longer influenced by any one individual. And so Singapore will remain Singapore for a long time. If there were any change at all, it would have happened when he retired 10, 15 years ago. But now it's a very stable society and they have very stable economic plans.
Now, Lee Kuan Yew was a close friend to our former president Suharto. Some people say, some critics say that they actually have a similar way of leading a country. What's your thought on this?
A similar way. They are both authoritarian and they are both ambitious, but they have very different responsibilities. Suharto's responsibility is 240 million people in 13,000 islands. He is just 2.4 million people on one island, so it's very different scope.
But how much do you think this kind of leadership has been successful in leading the two different countries?
No, I would say Lee is immensely successful in leading Singapore at that particular stage in time. Now it's a different time because people have begun to democratize. But he could never be successful in Indonesia because Indonesia needs a social leader, not just an economic leader, needs a political leader, and needs most of all a sensitive person who is not too hard to the people.
How do you think our President Jokowi is compared to Lee Kuan Yew?
Totally different creature.
Totally different.
Totally opposites. Jokowi is, I think, right for today's Indonesia because he relates to the people, he's sensitive, he responds to the people. In fact, he is one of the people. Lee Kuan Yew is not. He drives the country from top to bottom. Jokowi invites initiative from bottom to above.
It's actually the other way around, yeah?
It's the other way around.
But perhaps, is there anything that Indonesia can learn from that kind of leadership style, though?
I find it hard to think of any, because his leadership style is just not proper for a big country, for a heterogeneous, multi.
But it was quite successful in banishing corruption in Singapore, though.
Well, because the corrupt people leave the country, and there are only 2.4 million. It's the size of a big department store.
Totally different with Indonesia, yeah?
Yeah, in Indonesia, it's a totally different ballgame.
Now, let's talk more about regionally. What was his biggest contribution to ASEAN, do you think?
Oh, he, along with Suharto, are the two proponents of ASEAN, and both had a lot to gain from it, and it came at the same time. Suharto, at that time, wanted to establish his leadership as an anti-communist country in favor of economic development, a large country which had not been seen as a leader, although Sukarno was a leader in the global sense, but in Southeast Asia he was seen as quite erratic. Lee Kuan Yew is seen as, even at that time, very effective in Singapore, but has no regional credibility because it's just too small sized. Between the two of them, they were able to really had the archipelagic part of ASEAN, because the mainland part is Thailand. So ASEAN has always been Thailand, the mainland, and Indonesia, the archipelago, and Indonesia has Lee Kuan Yew as one ally there.
Now, in your opinion, Wimar, what would be Lee's biggest legacy to the world?
To show that if you're really determined, anything is possible. Because Singapore, when I first saw it in my younger years, was way behind Medan in terms of orderliness. It was dirty, it was corrupt, it was unsafe.
And this was back in 1950s?
I'm ashamed to say it was. I was already a kid in 1954, and I passed by Singapore. It was smelly, it was just unpleasant. You came to Medan, it was more ahead.
Really hard to imagine it.
Right, and now imagine comparing,
exactly.
no offense to Medan, but Singapore is world class.
Yes.
Yeah, so, that he succeeded in doing.
Wimar Witoelar, thank you so much for coming and sharing your thoughts with us today.
Thank you.